Hi, everyone. This is Jeff Praissman with Interactive Brokers. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the IBKR podcast studio, Scott Bauer from Prosper Trading Academy. Hey, Scott, how are you?
Great, Jeff. Yourself?
I'm doing well and love when you come in every other Wednesday morning, talk about the market, talk about the economy. For first time listeners, we generally talk a little bit about the week before and a little bit about the week after. And for more from Scott, you can go to prospertrading.com and also our website, ibkr.com. Click on education, and you can find all our old podcasts and webinars. So, Scott, the labor market was a big story last week. What were some of the key takeaways from the jobs data? And, what does it tell us about the health of the U.S. economy?
It's a bit different now this week than it was last week, right? After the report came out, yields pulled back, oil prices fell as the July NFPs came in much later than expected. In fact, we saw crude down about 10% last week. Obviously, that's rallied back quite a
Mhm.
bit. So, what is going on? I mean, the labor market is softening. There was, a lot of talk, maybe excuse that it had to do with the World Cup. Okay, great. We give that. Then what do you make of May and June also
Right.
being revised lower by over 100,000? So I think that is certainly a concern moving forward.
As we always talk about, there's no shortage of data, but looking at the broader picture, were there any signs last week and the beginning of this week that the economy is accelerating or slowing? What sectors of the market appear to respond most strongly to the data?
What's been on fire really are financials. I think it's 11 weeks in a row. Financials have been up.
Mhm.
We've seen kind of I don't want to say the rebirth of the tech trade or so, but a lot of these stocks that were, kind of left out there, weeks ago are resurgent again. And so talk of maybe that extended capex that people were concerned about, maybe that was a little long in the tooth or so. So the economy seems to be doing well, but certainly inflation data is going to be huge here.
We just had the CPI release this morning, and we have some important data coming out later this week, like PPI, initial jobless claims, U.S. retail sales. Let's kind of skip forward to the PPI. So, what insight does the PPI provide that the CPI alone does not capture?
Sure. Well, that looks at the producer side of things and not just the consumer. We all feel it individually, personally on the CPI side, but PPI shows, what are those businesses doing? What's happening on that producer side? So really, it's just as important. Sometimes it gets overshadowed by CPI, but PPI is certainly, absolutely just as important as our retail sales data.
And, retail sales data is going to be, usually offers sort of a fresh look at consumer spending. Given how much consumers drive a portion of the U.S. economy, what could this report tell us about growth heading into the second half of the year?
Boy, Jeff, the consumer has hung in there for
Mhm.
months, for years. There's been all this talk about pullback and the consumer not doing well, yet we've seen consumer spending, retail sales data actually very, very strong. So, especially this time of year, it's back to school, end of the summer. How is the consumer feeling about the economy right now? And that could really set the stage for what we see in a few months come Christmas season.
And in your opinion, out of those three PPI, initial jobless claims and or U.S. retail sales, which of them have the greatest potential to move the market next week? Or
I
end
think
of this week too, I should say.
I think retail sales actually, because we've seen initial jobless claims right around that 200,000 number. I know it was a bit lower a couple weeks ago. PPI is going to be what it's going to be. But when you really dive down to it, like you said earlier, the consumer is responsible for 68 to 70% of the economy. So we need to see if they are still spending in the health of the consumer.
Finally, last question, Scott. Beyond the economic calendar, what market theme should investors be monitoring over the next, week or so? Inflation, earnings, Fed expectations, AI related stocks, which we always seem to talk about,
Yeah.
global conflict, which is unfortunately we always have to talk about, or
Yeah.
something else.
I still think front and center, even though it's getting numb at this
Mhm.
point, is really global conflict, right? Because each day when we see something new here, we could see oil prices moving considerably, which then flows down, impacts inflation and all sorts of other things. So global conflict to me is still front and center. Earnings season is ramping up a bit. We still have retailers to go. But then what is the Fed going to do? And where are we with inflation? Is it still sticky? are we still seeing potentially what was expected to have the Fed raise rates in September that ebbed a little bit? Is that going to stay like that?
Scott, this has been great as always. For our listeners, you can find more from Scott at prospecttrading.com or on our website, IBKR.com. Click on education, go down to podcasts, and you can see all the great podcasts that Scott and I have done. All right, Scott, until next time, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a great end of the summer here.
Yeah, absolutely. You too.
Thanks.
The analysis in this material is provided for information only and is not and should not be construed as an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy any security. To the extent that this material discusses general market activity, industry, or sector trends, or other broad-based economic or political conditions, it should not be construed as research or investment advice. To the extent that it includes references to specific securities, commodities, currencies, or other instruments, those references do not constitute a recommendation by IBKR to buy, sell, or hold such investments. This material does not and is not intended to take into account the particular financial conditions, investment objectives, or requirements of individual customers. Before acting on this material, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances and, as necessary, seek professional advice.